The Beardmore relics. These are the Beardmore relic replicas. Toronto has the originals. Now, they were found by Mr. Dodds from Thunder Bay, or Port Arthur, back in the 1930s. He claims at his mining claim outside Warrenford Station, which is just south of Beardmore. He worked for the CN line, so he would travel back and forth that way. Now, he said he found them when he was dynamiting for his claim. And then nothing really happened for a while, and then somebody found out about them and said, well, likely Toronto would be interested in them, the archaeologists there. So then Toronto bought them, the Royal Ontario Museum. Then they got into this argument as to whether or not he found them where he found them, because a neighbor of his said, well, I saw them in his basement before he found them where he found them. However, what he found seems to be different than what that guy saw. But anyways, they all swore out their affidavits for this and that, so the Royal Ontario Museum published a booklet called Hoax or History. That was going through the whole thing. They tested them. They were for real, around 900 to 1000 AD. So they were real Viking relics. It was just that when the discrepancy of yes or no, did he find them where he found them, and nobody was missing them or claimed them, that they thought, well, maybe we better not show them, because they didn't know for sure what they were. So they got stored away in the Royal Ontario Museum for a lot of years. But meanwhile, once they were discovered and it hit the newspapers, I mean, it really hit the newspapers. So we have a fellow from Thunder Bay sent us all the newspaper clippings at that time for those years, maybe about 4 or 5 years worth of when they were going through. Everybody was finding swords all over the place from those reports. And then they got into saying, okay, there was white Indians up at James Bay. They got into the picture. Then they said, oh, okay. They even said, well, the Vikings must have showed the copper culture how to make all those copper artifacts that they made. But they're like a few thousand years way before that the copper culture was. So this is more recent. So okay, so then we knew that the Royal Ontario Museum had them. And when we opened our museum and got our museum going, the Nipigon Historical Museum, we thought, gee whiz, it would be nice to have the Beardmore relics. So Buzz Lyons got into about an 8-year correspondence with the Royal Ontario Museum, trying to get them to our museum, and they came up with a lot of, well, if you have them, you've got to have a 24-hour guard and insurance and all this sort of stuff. It was like we even got a cease and desist order for leave us alone. But Jack Stokes even got in it as speaker, and he went down there and said we want him and all that. And then they finally, okay, we'll just make you the replicas. So the replicas showed up, which is good because they're actually the same thing, just not the real ones, the way they made them up. And I was surprised because the whole case burnt down in the fire of 1990, and I thought, well, they're gone. But no, they survived. Their case burnt right to ashes, and the firemen found them in the ashes. So that was a surprise to us. And then I decided in 2011 we started a blog on the internet. And so how do you talk about the Beardmore relics? I put the whole thing up. I put the hoax and history up. I got the permission from the Royal Ontario Museum. I put all the newspaper accounts up. Then we have, the result of that is that you have people driving all the way from California to see these replicas, which are as near to the real thing as they'd ever get. They wouldn't be able to see it in Toronto maybe, though they are in display down there now in their Viking area. They're not claimed as the Beardmore relics part, but they are real stuff. So we have them coming from there. We have them, a lot of the people from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, they're interested in the Vikings because they really promote their Viking stuff over there in Minnesota. Then we have, oh yes, the fellow from California. His friend was the one that ran Lenape, which is, he is using the Norse sagas and ruins and Google Earth and trying to track their migration from Greenland when climate change came in on them and it froze up. They came across through Hudson Bay and then went down through Lake Winnipeg and then into, they figure, into Minnesota from that way. But since these were found on the, just on off the Blackwater River a bit, not too far from the shores of Lake Nipigon, we figure they likely came down through, from James Bay, down through into Lake Superior, through Lake Nipigon, and that route, because that was a natural migration. Every summer they would come from James Bay area, the natives, come down to Superior, do their fishing, do their berry picking, then go back up for the winters. So it's the roads back and forth was no problem. They just wouldn't be able to bring their boats, but they could actually rebuild them or whatever. So in one way it's a possibility, in another way, who knows. So anyways, he's been doing that research for over 20 years, trying to locate where it is. And then he's also going through the language, saying the Ojibwe language and the Norse language at that time, the various connections between those that he's finding. And then they had a big conference down St. Louis there a couple years ago. I sent pictures of all the information and the whole Viking routes hoax blog stuff down to them for their big seminar they had. And then there was where they were talking about 500 years in North America. They're doing a DNA testing of the natives to see if there's Northern European DNA in to try and verify the connections between Vikings coming down and that. So, yeah. And even the Royal Ontario Museum says if you want to know about the Beardmore relics, you look up on our blog. So it's Nipigon Museum, the blog.blogspot.com, something like that. Anyways, you just Google Nipigon Museum, the blog, and it'll pop up because we've got thousands and thousands of page views on that one. So we were sort of indebted to Jack Stokes, which was our Member of Parliament at that time. He also twisted their arms to get it. So we have Jack Stokes, we have somebody from the ROM, and then this picture here shows who made it, the guy at the ROM that made the replicas, and Buzz Lyons and Jack Stokes. So those are the important things. Now we have a sword, we have the axe head, and we have something that they call a wrangle, which likely has some connection to their shield. Now one guy over in Wisconsin, Michigan area, he was doing, they study up and they make all these, they make the replicas, they do a lot of Viking stuff. So he said, well, he'd make me up a sword and this, that, and the other thing, and a shield, but yeah. So there's a lot of back and forth just through the blog hits. The blog has really worked well. I was always a little bit worried about putting it up there, but since all over the world is looking at our stuff. It's really good. It's a really good way to go, and this video that we're making, I think will help, because there are people, definitely people, you know, in Australia, South America, Africa, Russia, whatever, that may never get here. But some of them make arrangements and come from England, right here.